Chris Hansen, welcome to the Family IT Guy podcast.
Well, thank you, Ben. It's an honor to be here.
So happy to have you, and I'm very fascinated to hear about your work today. And a lot of people know that you've been doing stuff with Roblox lately, but I thought maybe first we'd talk a bit about your background and how you got into where you are now. So, of course, people know you from the NBC show To Catch a Predator, and you did a lot of good work there. If my numbers are correct, you've facilitated 200 indictments and 120 convictions. Does that sound right?
The number, Ben, has gone up from there. I mean, that was in the early days of To Catch a Predator at NBC. Since To Catch a Predator, we have done Hansen versus Predator. We caught predators in that particular investigation. And now, and for the last 3 years, we've been doing Takedown with Chris Hansen, which is the current version of our predator stings. And so in the last 3 years, we're close to 300 predators who have been.
Wow, just in the last 3 years.
The last 3 years. And
wow.
We have our streaming crime network, True Blue. And then we have a relationship with Fox News. We do some content there. And then we have a YouTube channel, True Blue. And then I have a YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. So this content gets to a lot of places. And now we collaborate with probably a dozen, the number grows virtually every week, a dozen different law enforcement agencies around the country with which we conduct these stings. And, you'd think then 22 years into it, and in March of this year, it'll be 22 years since we conducted the very first predator investigation. Wow. The guys would get the message. They wouldn't show up. If for no other reason, they wouldn't want to be embarrassed on television or have to come face to face and go toe to toe with me. But that has not been the case. And we're all in. I mean, we're getting close to 900 or predators who have been exposed in these different investigations.
Wow.
Years. So this has been going on for 22 years. And
especially some of them recognize you when you show up. Like they know you're coming.
And it goes further than that. We routinely have chats, with the decoys. The sheriff's departments or the police departments around the country provide the decoys. And we're right in there with them watching the felony being committed in real time. And these guys will say, this isn't a Chris Hansen thing, or this isn't a Sheriff Brady Judd or Sheriff Jason Ard, or Sheriff, so-and-so, or Police Chief so-and-so operation, is it? And the decoy say, well, no, who's that? I don't even know who that is. Okay, because, there's this guy. He's been doing these things for a long time. He works with law enforcement. We had a guy actually send a link to an article in Louisiana to a decoy posing as a 15-year-old child that talked about my collaboration with the local sheriff, Jason Ard, in Livingston Parish, Louisiana. He sends an article and then shows up with his buddy. They're in the pool, in the hot tub at the house. And I walk out and I said, I knew it. I said, if you knew it, why did you show up? Well, and the usual excuses, we weren't going to do anything. But, we have fashioned this in a way where, first of all, the crime's committed with the chat, typically in most states. And the cases are very strong. I mean, I think we've got like a 99.1% successful prosecution rate. And It's very rare that one of these things slips through the cracks or isn't prosecuted. I mean, the sentencing is all over the board, quite honestly, Ben. We get a different sentence in Genesee County, Michigan than we do in Polk County, Florida. And that has to do with the courts, the backlogs, the prosecutor's offices, a lot of things go into it. But, the sentences generally range from probation on the low end and registration as a sex offender to, we've had guys get life. A lot of these guys have child porn with them. We had a case in Polk County, Florida, where a guy was offered a 10-year plea bargain. And he rolled the dice and went to trial, was found guilty. And the judge down in Florida sentenced him to mandatory minimum life in prison. He's gone.
Wow. So he's done for.
Done.
I've always been sort of, I don't know that the word fascinated is the right word, but definitely curious about that side of it, about the different lengths of sentencing that some people could get. It's always interesting to look at judicial systems and what sentences occur for different crimes, and the similarities are between some. But have you found that there's a good match typically between the crime committed and the sentence given? Like you mentioned probation for one. I mean, that sounds a bit light. Were there
It
reasons
does
for
sound
that?
light. It sounds light to me, and it sounds light to the law enforcement people who work on these cases. It gets frustrating sometimes, but here's the deal. At least with probation, say the guy's got no criminal history, he walks into the situation. They all say it's their first time. Of course, somebody's got to have a first time, but I think a lot of these guys are lying to me. And we see guys show up in one sting in the chat, but not come to the sting house, and then 2 or 3 stings later, they finally get up the nerve to show up at the sting house. But we see these guys get probation, treatment, registration as a sex offender, but at least then they have to report. At least you know where they are. And if they do offend again, then they go to prison. Right. So I don't see probation and registration as a sex offender as a loss or, a hit. I mean, you just have to understand that, different prosecutors' offices deal with this in different ways. I mean, in the very beginning, we had issues in California. We did our very first sting with law enforcement was in Riverside County, California. And the judges in some cases, kind of treated it like it was a reality TV show and not a real police investigation. And again, the first 2 we did, going back 22 years ago, we didn't have law enforcement involved. Law enforcement got involved after the show aired and prosecuted some cases successfully. And that was great. But it became very clear early on that in order to be socially responsible, we had to involve law enforcement. We had to figure out a way to collaborate. And, that was, kind of viewed by some traditional journalists as, crossing a line. But I was fine
really?
with it. I am fine with it because it's for the greater good. It's socially responsible. It's for justice. This is not traditional old-fashioned white shirt journalism. This is a different level of involvement. But once you cross into it, there's no coming back. That's the way we do it.
Well, especially if you look at the potential outcomes. I mean, because it's one thing to report on something, but it's another to have an actual outcome. That's what I find very fascinating about your career is you've really driven outcomes even prior to the predator thing with your journalism career.
Well, I've always tried to, and I've been fortunate, to get jobs over the years, whether it's been in local news in Detroit or even before that in Tampa and Lansing, at the network level, and today with our own network. Jobs that afforded me the opportunity working for people who had patience enough to see that, you can take your time with something or dig in deep on something and get results. I mean, these things aren't done in 8 hours typically. We put in a lot of time on these sting operations, and some days are more productive than others. But I always joke with people that I'd like to do a cooking show in Italy one day, but based upon the numbers of guys who still show up, I don't think that's in my future.
It's not slowing down.
Yeah, no, it isn't. I mean, we did a sting this summer in Marion County, which is where the detective works who handles all the Roblox cases that we're examining, a lot of them that we're examining in our investigation. And, 41 guys showed up in 6 days. I mean, that's a big number.
Wow. I mean, that's astounding.
Yeah, we routinely get, a dozen in a 3-day investigation, sometimes more. Different jurisdictions do it different ways. In Genesee, we'll do shorter, but more often in the year. In other jurisdictions, we may do, 1 or 2 a year. And so more manpower goes into it. And so you're likely to see a bigger number of guys show up just because you're creating a scenario that they want to embrace.
So speaking of the quantities, have so now that you've been at this for quite a long time, roughly 20 years dealing with face-to-face predator stuff. Is it your impression that has the problem gotten worse? I don't know how to measure it on like a per capita basis. Like
Yeah,
has the
it's a hard
technology
thing to
worsened it?
measure. We used to get asked all the time, or I would get asked all the time, how many predators are online at any given time? Well, it's you can't know that number. It's the ubiquitous nature of the internet and all the chat rooms. But I'll tell you this: in the beginning, we knew how to find them in 2 to 3 places, right? And we had decoys in chat rooms at AOL and Yahoo, MySpace, if you can remember that antiquated platform today. And now the number of platforms, and you know this, Ben, the number of platforms upon which adults can approach children for nefarious reasons has absolutely exploded. I mean, I have a difficult time keeping track of it. I'll hear of something from someone, or a parent will send me an email, or somebody will respond to a podcast episode and say, you need to check this out. And I share that with our law enforcement partners, and we explore it. But, there are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of platforms where this activity can take place. And it only needs to take place for a short period of time on one platform before it goes to, Snapchat that can be erased, or just texting on somebody's phone. And the predators know it, and they tell the kids how to, protect their secrets from being discovered by the parents, and protect themselves by not, having their chats exposed. But once we have them, we have them. And
Well, and I think it's interesting to think too about just the quantity of children that are exposed. So for example, I just read the other day that of the 6 billion people on the internet, 2 billion of them are under 18.
sure.
And, so like, have you seen, so as you've gone from AOL and MySpace and into the modern platforms, have you seen the predators change their methodologies, or is it generally similar?
It's the same grooming. If you were to take 20 chats from 20 different jurisdictions, you would see patterns. It's an adult mind trying to exploit a vulnerable child. It's grooming at its most basic level. We used to say growing up, don't talk to strangers. Good advice then, good advice now. But the guy who's a stranger on Wednesday may not be a stranger by Thursday.
This episode of the Family IT Guy podcast is sponsored by me. iPhone parental controls are notoriously difficult to set up correctly. When parental controls are too complicated, parents give up. And when parents don't use the tools, children pay the price. So I created a step-by-step guide that shows you exactly how to set up an iPhone to protect your child from addiction and from predators. You can disable the internet, disable the App Store, and disable the camera. You can make the screen black and white so that the iPhone becomes a tool instead of a toy. You will have confidence and peace of mind, and your child can be protected from the most dangerous parts of the internet. Go to familyitguy.com to learn more.
And we see this where, kids are in the angst-ridden stage of their lives, and they want to, reach out and try something new, and be more grown up than they actually are. And there are men and sometimes women out there who exploit that. And it's all fueled by, the fast pace, I want it now, fantasy, due to the easy availability of online pornography, child pornography. I mean, it's a huge issue. And there is very much a link between viewing child pornography and offending. And you see a lot of cases in our stings where they go back and they go through the guy's phone and they find child porn. And it's an additional charge, and it happens routinely. I mean, when I do the Predators I've Caught podcast, we go back at previous cases and update them. This guy got convicted of this. This is what happened. And this is what happened to his family. He's now in this prison. And as horrible as it is to possess child pornography, the only good news about it is when they catch a guy with it, it's a far more severe sentence
Yeah.
because of it.
Yeah.
And so they can put this guy away for a long time.
Well, it's interesting you say about the correlation between the viewing of the content versus the offending, because I've spoken to people recently who are analyzing what's happening with some of this AI generated content that's becoming popular and being shown to kids a lot. And the hypothesis there of what's happening is that because the algorithms in social media programs like Instagram will know who you're friends with and who you spend time with, and they'll show you content that your connections are viewing,
Yeah.
that it's actually exposing regular people to CSAM, because you might be connected to somebody that you don't realize is viewing CSAM on these platforms. And then that person is also viewing the photo that you posted of your daughter at gymnastics. And then the feed actually starts to show that, well, if that person likes both of those things, maybe you'll like both of those things. And the algorithms are actually starting to feed this stuff to people that would have otherwise never seen it.
Well,
and that strikes me as very problematic.
It is very problematic, and it's problematic from a law enforcement investigative standpoint too. I mean, my wife and I were in Florida this past weekend. I was giving a keynote speech at a fundraiser for the Child Rescue Coalition, big organization in Florida, and it has technology that can track the trafficking of child pornography in real time. I mean, they can put up a map, right? You can see the dots of where it's happening. And they share this technology for free with law enforcement around the world. And they have several big child porn rings. But make no mistake, there is very much a correlation between viewing CSAM and offending. And there's this argument out there in some quarters about, well, if they're looking at AI or if they're looking at pictures, they're not harming a real child. Well, first of all, a real child had to get harmed to make those pictures, right?
Yes.
Every time that picture is viewed, it's the re-victimization of that child. I can't be any clearer about it. And if you're making AI versions of it, it's just as bad, because ultimately, in my experience, what I have seen is that at some point, the porn, whether it's AI or real children, doesn't fulfill the fantasy. And that's when we see these guys knocking at our door of our sting house and showing up, or actually finding a child, or going on Roblox and grooming somebody, or Snapchat. I mean, this stuff is not happening just on the dark web. I mean, we don't go on the dark web.
Right.
I mean, we are on easily accessible social media platforms that you or I or our children could access virtually anytime.
That's a great point, because a lot of people probably think that this stuff is in some inaccessible corners.
No.
So not only is it on the open web, but it's also on platforms that, and I don't know the details involved here, but okay, the folks that run Snapchat and Instagram of these things, I know that they do make attempts at discovering these types of content, but,
sure.
And I'm certainly glad I'm not in their shoes, because the volume of it must be enormous. But this stuff is occurring effectively out in the open.
Absolutely. And, it's being hidden in different files and traded, frequently. I mean, it's not like they're seeking to make money either. These groups are trading this stuff because they love to look at it.
Yeah.
Yes, there are people making money. There are live CSAM rings overseas where children are being victimized on live streams. That's happening. And there are groups like 764 who encourage, nihilistic groups who encourage children to hurt themselves and capture this in a live stream. I don't know if they're making money, but the CSAM people are. But generally, I mean, these people are trading it because they love it. And it's just so hard to get my arms around that, and so hard to understand how a human being, an adult human being, could be wired to like
Same.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, but it
Yeah.
happens. And I have known dozens and dozens of federal agents and local law enforcement officers and detectives over the years who have to look at this stuff and identify it. I'm glad
Hmm.
they have to see it.
Yeah.
And
No,
they can only
that's,
do it for some period of time before they have to get away from it and cleanse their mind and their soul after seeing it. I mean, it's got to be
yeah.
the
I
most
mean,
disturbing thing you could possibly imagine.
I have such an enormous amount of gratitude to those police officers and investigators for doing that work, because at the end of the day, somebody has to
Yeah,
observe the evidence, and that is just the most awful thing I could possibly imagine. And thanks to them for doing that.
absolutely.
Now, when you talk about making money, one of the things with the that you've mentioned and that goes on in these games and the way that some of these kids are lured is via the in-game currencies. Would you mind talking a little bit about that and what you've learned about the way that that works? And like, is that, I imagine that because that's a mechanism that didn't necessarily exist 10 years ago, even let alone
Absolutely. Well,
20.
predators will use whatever currency they can figure out will be attractive to children. I mean, in the olden days it was, can you help me find my dog, or come look at something in my car, and they snag the kid. Today they can pose as a child on a social media platform and use inducements on Roblox, which is the focus of our investigation. There's a currency called Robux, and there have been cases where Robux have been used as an inducement to get children to do things they shouldn't do, photograph themselves, do things to themselves of a sexual nature, do things to their siblings, meet for sex. And the company Roblox will say that they've taken initiatives to make sure that that doesn't happen on that you can't, for instance, buy child porn with Roblox on their platform. But predators find ways to get around it. They're very involved. There's a deep connection between, Roblox and other areas of the internet, and they can still use those Roblox as inducement. Now, you can make a decision as to how culpable Roblox is in some of those different areas, but it's happening. And predators will use any inducement they can think of: freedom, alcohol, a trip, drugs, whatever it is, to get children to do what they want them to do.
So speaking of Roblox, you've made a documentary on Roblox, and I want to talk about that. But first, I just want to ask, why does Roblox stand out? What has drawn your focus towards Roblox in particular?
We started hearing over and over and over again from our law enforcement partners that they were investigating cases of children being groomed and preyed upon on this platform. And I, at the same time, was being bombarded by people on my social media, TikTok, Instagram, X, to investigate this. And I was getting emails from people all over the world saying you need to take a look at this. So, about the same time we became aware of Schlepp, who's an activist. He was a Roblox protege, big social media platform. And he, at a very young age, was on Roblox. He was part of their youthful team and would go to the different conventions and things. And he himself, at a very young age, was exploited by a very popular content creator, and it sent him into a mental health spiral, which at the age of 11 landed him in a hospital after threatening to take his life. Good parents got through it. But later in life, he became an activist and actually started catching predators who were tied to Roblox. And so he had a very big social media following. And I reached out to him. I said, look, we would like you to be part of this this documentary. And so he agreed. So he's a part of it. It turns out the law firm representing him in Chicago at the time we started this investigation was representing some 500 other people who claimed to have been abused on Roblox. From the time our investigation started until the conversation you and I are having today, that number has grown. This is just one law firm to 3,000.
Wow.
And there are multiple law firms engaged in these cases. So,
Wow.
Roblox likes to point the finger at Discord, that some of this activity takes place there and moves over or back and forth. But, Roblox has a server on Discord. There are Roblox game creators who go to Discord to set things up and invite people to come in and play their games on Roblox. So there's a little bit of finger pointing there. And look, Discord's got a lot of responsibility and a lot of culpability here too. But we decided, for the purposes of this documentary, to focus on Roblox. And so we set out to talk to the most knowledgeable people out there, those who have been targeted, those whose children have been targeted, the law enforcement detectives who are involved here, and the lawyers who have studied this case, who have brought the lawsuits. And so the first hour, the first episode of our series will drop at the end of February 27th, on my streaming crime network, True Blue. And if folks want to check it out, it's watchtrueblue.com. It'll live there.
Is that TRUBLU?
It's TRUBLU. So it's True Blue, watchtrueblue.com for details. And
excellent.
And so people be able to see it, and it's eye-opening, Ben. I mean, it's I like to explain it this way. This investigation into Roblox is like To Catch a Predator 2026. Same DNA, different battlefield.
Yeah. The digital, like, caricature battlefield. It's
And parents look at these characters and these games, and they look like Lego characters, and it's marketed to parents and children, to be a learning experience. It's almost like something that would be marketed through a school district, and kids can create games on the platform. So that, it's a video game within a video game. It's a genius idea. It's a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company based in San Mateo, California. Huge campus.
Yeah.
Beautiful campus.
I mean, one of the biggest games in the world, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, 100 million plus kids use it a day. And these kids are as young as 5 years old. Now, since the first of the year, Roblox will say that it has rolled out additional security measures, including facial recognition and age verification. But because you stuck your rather intelligent self into this and poked around, that kids can get around this. And 8-year-old kids can end up in very sexually charged and or violent games.
And it creates a real false sense of security.
Well, it does create a false sense of security. And, I've had a number of background discussions with Roblox and its chief security officer and its press people in the preparation of this documentary. They have elected not to be interviewed on camera. I don't know how that helps them. They give me a lot of technical information, a lot of background information. All, their statements are used in the documentary, including the two things I just told you. But I can't imagine why they don't want to sit down and talk about this. I've done stories critical of a lot of big multi-billion-dollar companies that make airplanes, like Boeing. What does Boeing do when there's an issue? They invite you into the factory, they show you how it all works, how it's put together, and they explain to you what they're doing to make these planes safe. And while they don't admit any liability for the crashes that we've been investigating, potentially tied to the rudder system, they're going to make sure that the rudder system is as safe as it can possibly be. All that goes in the story. Now, why would Roblox not talk to me? It intimates that it's because we interviewed the Attorney General of the state of Louisiana, who's filed a lawsuit along with a dozen other attorneys general, and because we interviewed Schlepp. which
I think that's all the more reason to talk to you, really is.
yeah,
I mean, you know,
I think it's either fear or arrogance, man.
yeah.
And uh, they know that I know more than they want me to know. And I've talked to law
Mm.
enforcement investigators who handle these cases around the globe. And I ask them, what would you ask Roblox? And one of the questions routinely is, why don't you allow law enforcement on your platform to conduct investigations?
Sounds like a great question. I would proactively partner with them, I would imagine,
I would
if
think
I
so.
was the head of
They'll try to
safety
do
for
things like
Roblox.
they make donations to the Alliance of the Attorneys General to make it look like they're supporting all this, and they try to hire people who have been involved in law enforcement, and they try to get them as experts in their cases and to be on their boards. And there's recently they enacted a parental initiative where they want parents to be involved and to have a
Mm.
committee, but they want the parents to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And I've seen more than I can. So they want to, and they've done this in the settlement
Uh,
discussion, in the lawsuits against Roblox. They want to have non-disclosure agreements to those who claim they've been victimized on Roblox, and they're seeking a settlement, a monetary settlement from Roblox. They want non-disclosure agreements. So they want a gag order, basically. And this is not a new phenomenon. We interview a guy who was victimized on Roblox 15 years ago. He is now, former Army soldier, got kids of his own, big, strong guy, deadlift 716 pounds. And when I sat with him to talk about how he was groomed and abused by somebody on Roblox, this giant of a man was reduced to tears.
mm.
Good parents. We interviewed a woman named Samara down in Marion County, Florida. Homeschooled all her children. Youngest one, who's 10, sneaks onto Roblox. She finds out because she's got an inactive Instagram account where she starts getting messages from this guy in the UK who's grooming her daughter, asking her to do all kinds of sexual things to herself.
Mm.
She engages, takes it to law enforcement. They go, locally in Marion County, the detective gets involved and they get in contact with the law enforcement in the UK. They arrest the guy. At around the same time, in the same county in Florida, they arrest a young man for sexually abusing a dozen or more kids on Roblox, getting them to do things. So this is just in Marion County, Florida, in the span of 6-8 months. If that's going on there, what's going on in the rest of the country? What's happening in the rest of the world?
Yeah, because I'm picturing the map, and you put a big map up on the wall, and you take a needle, and you put the needle in Marion County. It's one little tiny dot, and then there would be millions of those dots if you were to pick all the rest of the world. And with the quantity of kids that are playing the game, and it is a global game,
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like, okay, all right, fine. So Roblox makes a game, bad stuff happens on there. You'd think, well, so then parents find out and then they try to make sure their kids don't play. I mean, of course, you mentioned the one mom who she didn't know, right?
Right.
But where it troubles me quite a bit is that Roblox is marketed as safe for kids. So in the App Store, in the Apple App Store, the app has an age rating of 13 plus. But then on the Roblox website, you can register as young as 5, which right there, I don't understand why Apple hasn't kicked Roblox off the App Store, because Apple typically doesn't go for stuff like that.
Right.
And then you have Roblox is partnered with SpongeBob, Barbie, these what's it called? Sonic.
Mm-hmm.
These are brands for young kids, boys and girls both. They're marketing to children. And then I also wonder too, and I hope that your work helps the folks that work at the companies that make Barbie and Sonic and SpongeBob. I hope that they start to think about, who are we partnering with?
Who they do their
You
deal.
know,
I mean, look, there's a lot of
yeah.
money here,
Oh, huge. Yeah.
it just, and Roblox takes a 35% VIG on any transaction using Roblox, according to the lawyers who've been investigating this case. So if something nefarious is happening with Roblox, are they not somehow complicit if they're taking a piece of the pie? I don't know.
Right.
But you have to,
And
wonder, and look, I get that some of the crimes that have been committed on Roblox have been reported by Roblox, right? All internet platforms are legislatively mandated to report inappropriate contact between adults and children to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, right? And the NCMEC farms that information out. It's a wonderful organization. I've been involved with them for many years, and they give that information in referrals to law enforcement. But what do they miss? What should they be doing? And what I'm being told by investigators who look at these cases very closely on a routine basis, that yes, Roblox will, when they come across something, report it to NCMEC, as they should, just like Facebook or Meta or any of the others would. But then they don't go. They may ban that particular identification of that human, but they don't take the next step to ban any other account that person might take.
oh, really?
Well, that's what the law enforcement guys are telling me. And is that because they don't want to, step on continuous engagement? I mean, I can't believe they don't want predators on their site. Nobody wants.
I wouldn't think so.
And that's the other thing about Roblox not going on camera. If I were Roblox, I would give my best information on what they are doing for safety, and then I would look at me and say, remember, Chris, it's the predators committing the crimes, not Roblox, which is true.
Yeah.
They're just using this platform in some cases, like all predators do. They find whatever platform there is. So the question is, are they doing enough there? I mean, we've got such an open line with people who are concerned about this. I had a woman reach out to me, and this is in the documentary. You'll see this when it comes out, whose husband was grooming a 15-year-old girl on Roblox. He had his own account. Sometimes he'd be on with the kids, the whole thing. The daughter catches him talking to this girl. They're in Texas, the girl's in California. She blows a whistle to the mom. The mom grabs the phone in the account, sees the messages, calls the cops. Then goes on TikTok, says, I got to reach out to Chris Hansen's team. I track her down. We go down there and do the interview. She lays out the whole story. Cops have the case down in Harlingen. She then reaches out and finds the mom of the 15-year-old girl, gets them on board. They get interviewed by the detectives. I confront the soon-to-be ex-husband in the parking lot of his employer, read him the text that he sent. It's all, just like a predator investigation. And they're charging him. They charge him with a felony. So, I mean, this stuff has just come organically out of the fact that we are doing a documentary on Roblox. So, the first hour is done. That is coming out February 27th, as I mentioned. The second hour will be close behind. And then imagine everything that's going to come out of this, man, based upon the reporting we've already done, based upon the exposure we're giving this subject. And so I think we're going to be on this for a long, long time. And I know you've done a lot of reporting on it, and you've initiated a lot of security discussions, through your contacts and your knowledge of the industry. And I just think it's the more you talk about this stuff, the more you can educate people, the better off we all are. I mean, you look, these predator investigations and this Roblox investigation, I mean, it's shocking stuff. It's compelling stuff. And people watch it for a lot of different reasons. The predator investigations, they're darkly humorous. It's a battle between good and evil. The stories are old as the Bible, but there's a collision. You're watching somebody commit a felony in real time and, get confronted, and then you see justice served. You you see them get arrested. So I understand that's popular for a lot of different reasons, but you also hope that it creates a dialogue and awareness that makes parents at the dining room table say, hey, look, I watched this. I'm going to let you watch it.
Yeah.
Use this as a way to get into the conversation. I mean, the next doc we have coming out is on sextortion, which a lot of people have talked about, and you've talked about for years. And I talk to parents groups about this. I mean, these kids get caught up in the moment. A 15 to 17-year-old kid can't get past the fact that his social media presence might be marred because somebody got an intimate picture of him and is going to maybe put it on the internet, and he's embarrassed, and he can't get out of that moment of shame. Well, if you slow down and breathe for 35 minutes, you realize it's not a big deal. There's a senator in South Carolina, Brandon Guffey, and his son committed suicide. I interviewed him for that documentary, Sextortion documentary coming up, and I happened to see him at this Child Rescue Coalition fundraiser in Florida where we spoke. And heartbreaking story. But he gives a speech to kids. He says, look, this is 2026. If your junk's not on the internet, it's going to be. So everybody's junk is on the internet. So just get over it. Don't think that this is the end of the world. And if there's something worse than that, then get with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a whole protocol to get stuff taken down. But, parents need to let their kids know that if they screw up on the internet, that they can come to the parents, and we're not going to beat them up. We're going to say, all right, let's get this done. Let's fix it. Make it a learning moment, a teachable moment, and move on. And that's, so you got to teach your kids. We can do all the investigations we can physically do. Law enforcement can do it. And when Roblox does take measures to make the platform more secure, that's great. But at the end of the day, the predators always find a workaround. Kids always find a workaround. And so the best defense is the fence you build around your house, what you teach your kids, and allow yourself to be their first resource. And if you can't fix it, we'll find somebody who will.
I think I agree. I think that's the ticket is like, hey, listen, if I give you a device that connects you to the internet, I am connecting you to dangerous people. If you get contacted by dangerous people and you tell me, you're not in trouble.
Yeah.
Free pass, I will help you. Like, I'm not going to take your device away. I'm not going to punish you. I'm going to help you.
Exactly.
So speaking of guys like Schlepp, you have these kind of, sometimes people call them vigilantes, but like the independent predator catchers out there. What's your take on folks like that? Because I'm sure you get contacted all the time. I get contacted all the time by people saying like, "How do I go help and get these guys? Can I log on and catch them myself? And what do I do with them?" And I was like, "Hey, I don't know. Maybe you should ask Chris."
It's a slippery slope, right? I mean, I think there are some people out there who've done some great work, and I think there's a very important place in our society for citizen journalists. Citizen journalists, crowdsource the solution of criminal cases. Podcasts have, been very helpful to law enforcement. But there's a fine line. You've got some I don't want to call them vigilante because they're not all vigilante, but you got some groups who go after predators. They set up stings. Some share with law enforcement. Some don't. Some cases get prosecuted. Some don't. Some are just for clicks and cash. So I'm very hesitant to put them all in the same category. And every time I try to do it, I get in trouble and I get hate mail and people attacking me on X and blah, 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 blah. But there's a big difference between Vitaly, who's like, the Borat of predator catchers who himself got locked up, and to some of the other more mainstream people out there. And look, if bad guys are getting put in prison for trying to harm children, that's a good thing. But if it's not done properly, then the guy doesn't get prosecuted, and he's back out there, and he hasn't faced justice. So, look, there are varying levels of success with different people. Look, ours is absolutely. We've been absolutely transparent about our methodology since day one, and painstakingly so. This is what we do. This is how we do it. You're seeing everything. This is the prosecution, or the lack thereof, it's all out there. And so I can only speak to what I do. And again, we're talking about a 99.1% successful prosecution rate.
It's amazing.
You know, one hand basically the guys who didn't get justice on these cases.
Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, speaking of outcomes, is for a person like that gets arrested, if they get locked up, and if 99.1% of them get locked up, that means they're not doing it to the next kid and the next kid and the kid after that.
Right.
And that's very beautiful. Amongst all this, it's a very dark topic, but there's really the outcomes. There's a lot of positivity there, you know, and the amount of education that your documentary is going to bring to parents and kids both. Because I know I've gotten a lot of feedback on my Roblox work where people say, hey, because of the education, we've decided to stop playing Roblox and we're just playing something else because there's lots of other games to play.
Sure.
And that's helping kids.
Monopoly, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got the game of life sitting right over there that we were playing last night, you know?
And to be not as engaging as a video game, but you know, that's the thing.
Not quite,
You know, my guys are, you know, 34 to 24, you know, we're out of that danger zone. You know, they're some of them are reporting on it like I am, but, you know, it's a very different world now. I mean, from my kids to your child to, you know, even younger, it's really challenging. You know, I remember World of Warcraft and yelling at my son to get up and get to bed. He was in high school. He said, well, I can't, I'm going to leave the team behind. I said, well, you know, team's going to have to be without you because, you know, you're going to bed. But there wasn't, you know, if you weren't on the computer doing it, you know, you weren't going to play. In other words, you couldn't take his phone up or take his tablet up to the bedroom and do it. And today you can do all this stuff on your phone. And so it's a bit more of a challenge.
Well, there's a good point too, before we wrap here, is in terms of like what parents can do, A, be educated by consuming your content and watching your documentary, and then B, take a couple of specific actions. And really one of the biggest ones that I think is the most impactful move and a very relatively easy move is defining a policy in the house that the internet doesn't go in bedrooms. And it doesn't go in bathrooms, and that the internet stays in common areas of the home, because all the troublesome things occur in private late at night for the most part, I believe. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. And I also think that, you know, and you've discussed this in some of your content, that, you know, parents can limit, you know, messaging on these platforms, including Roblox, between, you know, their children and strangers. They can limit what games they can be exposed to. But like you say, you can still see what's available. You may not be able to get in there as a kid, but you see what's available.
Yeah.
And you made a great point when you talked about that, because you're making it forbidden fruit, and how long till a kid figures out a way to get in there.
Yeah. And that part, I try so hard not to be judgmental of others, folks that I don't know, that I've never met, that I don't know anything about, like all the folks that work at Roblox. But it's just so difficult to process this stuff of, you know, exposing kids to inappropriate material, even if it's not an individual predator. Exposing as young as a 5-year-old child to sexual materials in a gaming environment, I just don't get it, man. Like I don't understand, because there are ways for them to address that on the technical side, and I don't know why they allow that.
Well, they shouldn't. And to be fair, I think they've taken steps to prevent that. You know, I think it's a little more difficult for kids to get into it now than it was prior to January 1. But, you know, it's still the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I think if you allow law enforcement to run a couple of stings on your platform and pinch a couple of people doing bad stuff, you might send a message out there.
Yeah, set the tone. Like, hey, if you're a predator, you don't want to be here.
But, you know, people, they're worried about, they get so caught up in what people are going to say online and what's their image. And, you know, I got the vast majority of people are cheering that we have Schlepp involved in this documentary. but you still get snippy little people who say, "Oh well, he met him on Discord in some of the cases." And well, it's the point of it.
Yeah.
They're interchangeable. They're connected. There's a
Yeah,
service
absolutely.
back and forth. So watch the whole thing, and there are people who just don't want anything to change. They want it to be the wild wild west, right? And so Roblox is
Yeah.
trying to cater to them and to everybody else, and to, I suppose, be responsible to parents. But it's the cat's out of the bag there, and
Yeah.
so again, the bottom line to this whole discussion and to the investigation is parents have to really be vigilant and not rely on a multi-billion-dollar gaming company to always do the right thing or the most conservative thing. I mean, you run your show, and you have to, because the next most popular
Yeah.
thing is going to be the same.
Yeah, exactly. And be skeptical of the marketing. My summary for parents and for kids alike at the end of the day is that Roblox is not safe for kids. It's all, it's in my opinion, just simple as that. It's just not safe for kids. That's all. If adults want to play, fine,
Yeah.
do your thing.
Or you want to play over your kid? You want your kid to play with you over their shoulder? It's a different discussion.
Yeah, exactly. So Chris, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Come on.
I think we've got some more collaborations to come here, so I look forward to that.
I hope so. And thank you for putting this together, really, because I think that the educational component of your work is fundamental. And I appreciate you doing this. Thank you very much.
That's a high praise coming